I have been doing today, since I come home from church, thoroughly amateur productions. I don't have a production company, don't suppose I ever will, but I've been joking that that's my production company, Thoroughly Amateur Productions. And the reason I'm doing this is my fourth video today. The reason I'm doing these today was suddenly a bunch of ideas come to me and I wanted to get them out of the way. And then later on in the week, I'm on vacation this week, I'll do the videos that I had planned ahead to do. Right now, what I want to do is go into how I evaluate whiskey. They call it whiskey tasting. Well, as you're going to see, it's more than just tasting whiskey. So I call it evaluating whiskey. I'm going to use a Glencairn glass designed specifically by Scottish glassmakers and blenders. Master blenders in Scotland, obviously they do blending, but in a sense I think they're also kind of what we in the States call master distillers. So they designed that specifically for Scotch whiskey, and of course it works for all other whiskey as well. And what I'm going to demonstrate with is Balcones Lineage Texas Single Malt Whiskey. It is, let's see, 94 proof. I hate it when all they list is the alcohol by volume, because I don't think in those terms. I grew up with proof. You know, you tell me something is 47% alcohol by volume, that really doesn't mean much to me. You tell me it's 94 proof, I say, oh, okay, I know about where it is. It is aged at least 36 months in oak, as it says here on the label. That's 3 years, at least 3 years. It's 100% corn mash bill. I don't recollect what it cost me, but then that is just information. It's not the actual evaluation. To evaluate a whiskey, I don't pour the glasses full as I normally would, but because once I'm done with this video, I'm going to go about doing some other things, I might pour it as full as I normally do. We'll just see how it comes out. Because of the awkwardness of the Glencairn glass base, I pick it up like this. I tilt it up. For me, that has proved easier. And I pour some whiskey. Well, that'll do. I'm not going to go back and either add or subtract. Set that over here, since I don't suppose I'll need it anymore. And what I do first is I look at the color. Hold it up in different ways to the light, and it's this nice reddish color, and that comes partly from the grain, I think. I'm not sure. All whiskey comes off the still white. It looks like water, but even so, the aspects of the grain, the chemical makeup, I suspect do have something to do with what it does when it ages as far as color. And then there's the wood. Now, this lineage is a single malt whiskey. Therefore, they age it either in new uncharred barrels or used charred barrels. Now that's the law in Scotland for making Scotch, and Balcones is making their single malt that way. And so 3 years in Scotland would not give you that deep a color. But in Waco, Texas, where they make this stuff, the climate swings. It goes real hot, it goes real cold, it can do it overnight, and so the whiskey moves in and out of the barrel a lot more and gives that color. Next, and this is just my personal pleasure, I look at the legs, and I don't know how well you can see the legs here, but that, if it tells you anything at all, it just tells you that it's a viscous whiskey or not very viscous. Here the legs are forming widely spaced. They're running down long. They're not taking too long to form. And 94 proof, that makes about that. That makes sense. And then comes the beginning of what you might call the real evaluation, nosing the whiskey. Now, your nose is going to be different than mine. Physically, how it works. My right nostril can only detect alcohol. It can't detect anything else. You'll see a lot of people do this. Move the glass back and forth under their nose. I don't, because it serves no useful purpose for me. If it works for you, feel free to do it. So what I do first is I bring the glass fairly close to my nose, and I'm going to see if I can turn sideways and let you see just how close or far I get. The first nosing, and I don't know if you could tell, but you want to have your mouth open a little, not just your jaw dropping to the floor, but have it open a little, because taste and smell are intimately connected. If you ever notice when you have a cold or allergies, anything that stuffs up your nose, you can't taste as well. They're connected to each other. So with my mouth a little open, and I'll move the glass away, bring it back, move it away, bring it back. And as you can see, my nose is not getting into the glass yet. And that gives me the lighter notes, the notes that come right out of the glass. And what I'm getting here, by the way, is honey, something else sweet, and there's alcohol in that. I'm not actually evaluating it, so I won't go into great detail. I won't take some time. But then I put my nose right in, and you'll see the difference. And especially when you put your nose in the glass, you don't want to go, you'll burn your nose. The alcohol fumes are alcohol. They do have a bite, and you don't want to burn your nose out. So you just breathe in gently. And you get different notes. It's the same whiskey, but it's a little bit different thing that you're getting. And now I'll turn back around this way. That's nosing the whiskey, getting the aroma of it, the smell, the nose, if you want to go all fancy. And I'm always swirling it. I pour just my nightly glass, which I'm not evaluating. I'm just drinking because I know I like it. And I'll swirl it, and I'll look at the legs. And I might do that for 15 minutes before I take my first sip. And even when I'm just drinking whiskey, I still nose it. But for evaluating whiskey, swirling does have a practical benefit. It stirs up the whiskey. It releases the aroma. It opens up the flavors. If you ever want to perform the experiment, you can pour a little in and just, without swirling it at all, nose it and taste it, and then swirl it a good bit and nose and taste again, and you'll see a difference. And also, just sitting over time can open up the whiskey. Because some people like to put a little water in, but I've found that I prefer whiskey I don't have to do that to, that it's already fully developed right out of the bottle. But for tasting, just a sip. And swish it around in your mouth. Roll it over your tongue. Move it front to back, side to side, in a circle. What you want to do is allow all your taste buds, all your faculties to engage with the whiskey. You want to let the taste buds that detect sweetness have a say. You want to let the taste buds that detect bitterness have a say. It's just like when you're eating cheesecake. You don't just taste it with part of your mouth. It's in all of your mouth. You're chewing it around, and the taste spreads, and you get the full glory of that cheesecake. Can you tell I love cheesecake? And so it is with whiskey. Another sip, and we'll roll it around in the mouth, and we'll see what we get. Which notes is it sweet? Does it taste like caramel or vanilla? Do we get oak? Do we get smoke? Do we get, some people have said they get leather from whiskey. There's spice in some whiskey, and malted barley, which this lineage is. It's 100% malted barley mash bill. It will give you a different kind of spice than rye does. So we'll do that. I let it go too far back on my tongue and it got hot. And that's something I found. It may be different for others. It may be different for you, but I have to not let it get too far back or it starts to burn and messes up tasting things. Or if I hold it in my mouth too long, sometimes all the flavors will fade into the burn of the alcohol, because this is alcohol. At 94 proof, 47% of what's in the glass is ethyl alcohol. So if you have 2 ounces of whiskey, almost a full ounce is alcohol. And you get other whiskeys. Wild Turkey 101 is 101 proof. That means over half of it is alcohol. I've got something here. Balcones Brimstone is 106 proof. That means that if you have 2 ounces of that in a glass, 1.3 ounces, if I'm doing the math right, is alcohol. Alcohol is the majority of what's in the glass at that proof. And so you do want to be careful. It'll bite you if you're not careful. It can burn. I don't know if you've ever watched Moonshiners, but there's one episode, I think it's Jim Tom Hedrick. He takes a slug of corn liquor right off the still and he says, "Woo, that's hot." And that's what, and you're not careful, you can get real hot whiskey. Even after they proofed it down, if you're not careful, it can burn you. But we take another sip, and however many sips you need to get all the notes on the tongue, take that many. There is no correct number of tasting sips. There is no correct number of sniffs when you're nosing it. However many it takes you to get what you can out of that whiskey. If you can do it in one sniff, one sip, good. I don't think I've ever seen anybody on YouTube who can do that. But if you can, great. But however many sips it takes to get the flavors on the tongue. And then I do a sip and I focus on the finish. Now that I've swallowed, what am I getting? Is it a long finish? Does it remain there for a while? Am I getting sweetness? Am I getting oak? Am I getting vanilla? What is lingering on my tongue and in the upper part of my throat? And those are the 3. And by the way, you can take as many finish sips as you want to as well. If in order to understand the finish, you have to take 10 sips, take 10 sips. Nobody's counting. And if you're just writing a review rather than recording one for a video, nobody will ever know unless you tell them. But those are the stages then that I follow in evaluating whiskey. I look at the color. What does that prove? It might give you some indication of aging time, but climate has something to do with that too. A whiskey that's aged 2 years in Texas might be as dark as a whiskey that's aged 10 years in Scotland. But I look at the color, I look at the legs. Those really don't indicate much except the amount of alcohol in the whiskey, and that'll be on the label. Then I nose it, I sniff, I get the aromas, and that can build anticipation. I remember the first time I nosed Maker's Mark. I worked at Sam's Club too long. I took a sniff and I went like this, you know, say this is Maker's Mark. I did this. Literally. I could not believe the beautiful nose that was coming off the whiskey. And then when a week or two later I had my first bottle of Balcones pot still bourbon, my first Balcones bottle that was, I did this. And I literally said, wow. Just off of nosing it, one sniff. You get real good whiskey. It may not be complex. It may be real simple, just a couple of 3 notes. But if it's good whiskey, those notes will get your attention and they will hold your attention. And you may not look at the glass and say, wow, but you'll want to do more. You'll want to get into the whiskey. And the same with the sip. You know, when I took my first sip of Maker's Mark, when I took my first sip of the Balcones, I sat up and took notice, because good whiskey will get your attention, not by hammering you with drunkenness and a hangover, with the aroma, with the taste. All good whiskey is sipping whiskey. You get so much enjoyment out of it. And if you get plastered, you can't judge the whiskey properly. And if you get wasted, the aroma and the color and the flavor lose their significance because your mind is out of whack. And what I would like you to do, it would be my fervent wish, is that you, like me, drink whiskey to look at, to smell, to taste, to enjoy, to savor.